So a moment ago I saw this post on Twitter and it says interrupting is a sign of respect in ADHD culture, and they were arguing that it's not and that it's rude. And I want this to be understood as like kind of a call in rather than a call out. So know that I don't have any like ill will against this creator, and if they see this, know that like I'm saying this with the best of intentions, and it's important I think that you know that this is like a very complex issue. So I responded and said, be careful, because a take like this easily becomes respectability politics, which is a weapon of white supremacy and erasure of all non-Western ways of thinking, being, and relating to others. So I expanded on it by saying, speaking is like sexuality in that there are no universals, and so long as there is consent and understanding, nearly anything can be agreed as cooperative, pleasurable, and fulfilling to some folks. As an example, there's a book that I read during my PhD in an intercultural communication course. It's by Edward Hall. It's called Beyond Culture. The book was like ahead of its time, but also a product of its time, so be aware of that. It's not like a perfect text by any means. But I think one of the most relevant and interesting insights gained from the book that is relevant to this post is that there's multiple concepts of time, and our concepts of time change the way that we see ourselves and exist in the world and relate to others. So for instance, he starts the chapter by saying, Western man has created chaos by denying that part of his self that integrates while enshrining the parts that fragment experience. These examinations of man's psyche have also convinced me that the natural act of thinking is greatly modified by culture. Western man uses only a small fraction of his mental capabilities. There are many different and legitimate ways of thinking. We in the West value one of these ways above all others, the one we call logic, a linear system that has been with us since Socrates. Western man sees his system of logic as synonymous with the truth. So later on in the very same chapter, he discusses terms about time, and he says, as a case in point, let us examine how white Americans are captives of their own time and space systems, beginning with time. American time is what I've termed monochronic. That is, Americans, when they are serious, usually prefer to do one thing at a time, and this requires some kind of scheduling, either implicit or explicit. Not all of us conform to monochronic norms. Nevertheless, there are social and other pressures that keep most Americans within the monochronic frame. However, when Americans interact with people of foreign cultures, the different time systems cause great difficulty. Monochronic time and polychronic time represent two variant solutions to the use of both time and space as organizing frames for activities. Space is included because the two systems, time and space, are functionally interrelated. M-time emphasizes schedules, segmentation, and promptness. Polychronic systems are characterized by several things happening at once. They stress involvement of people and completion of transactions rather than adherence to preset schedules. Polychronic time is treated as much less tangible than monochronic time. Polychronic time is apt to be considered a point rather than a ribbon or a road, and that point is sacred. In the next chapter, he's talking about the way that this affects communication style. So he continues on to explain how this relates to the way that we communicate. And he says, unlike animals, some of whose responses are innate, much of man's communicative behavior evolved independently of his physiology, and like the spoken language, it cannot be read with assurance if one is dealing with a new culture or even a subculture one does not know well. Unless we start tampering with it, this pan-human form will be with us for thousands of generations to come. What has changed, what has evolved, and what is characteristically man? In fact, what gives man his identity no matter where he's born is his culture, the total communication framework, words, actions, postures, gestures, tones of voice, facial expressions, the way he handles time, space, and materials, and the way he works, plays, makes love, and defends himself. All these things and more are complete communication systems with meanings that can be read correctly only if one is familiar with the behavior in his historical, social, and cultural context. Everything man is and does is modified by learning and is therefore malleable. But once learned, these behavior patterns, these habitual responses, and these ways of interacting gradually sink below the surface of the mind and, like the admiral of a submerged submarine fleet, control from the depths. The hidden controls are usually experienced as though they were innate simply because they are not only ubiquitous, but habitual as well. So this is all to say it's very important that we don't treat Western society as if it is the only universal way of being and thinking, because that's just not true. And unfortunately, like I said in the first comment, it's a tool of white supremacy that erases just by and large a vast majority of the populace, and especially folks that have been historically and intentionally targeted. That includes neurodivergent folks, and erases the concept of neurodiversity writ large.